Welcome to Today in Space. I am your host, Alex G. Orfanos, and we're here for another episode of People of Science, where we talk to people in the industry. We talk about what they're doing in their day-to-day and what got them to choose to work in this gauntlet of work that is STEM. And this week, we have the CEO of Arcfield, Kevin Kelly. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on today and speaking with us.
I'm glad to be here, Alex.
Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an intro into who you are, and then give us a little background into what got you into the STEM field.
Sure. I've spent the bulk of my career, 30 years now, supporting telecommunications, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and the development of microelectronics packages for the use in the national security and intelligence community. I grew up as a STEM interested kid, the type of kid that took every gift that I got for Christmas or my birthday apart because I wanted to see how it worked. I remember when my parents, when I was 10 years old, they bought me a really nice bicycle. And the agreement that my father made with me when he bought the bicycle was that I was not allowed to take it apart. And that lasted for about a day and a half before I had the whole back sprocket off, and I wanted to see the ball bearings, and I wanted to take it all apart. Most things went back together, not everything, but I must say I'm just a gearhead at heart. I'm the type of person that just wants to know how something works, and if I can't figure it out, the good thing is there's the grand old internet, and I can go out and find out at least at a cursory level how things work, and it's just been something that I've been interested in. I went to school at Penn State, did my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. Went on to the George Washington University, where I earned my master's in systems engineering and engineering management. I've just been in an engineering capacity and discipline throughout my entire career, and now have the pleasure and privilege of running Arcfield, which is a company filled with engineers and scientists all focused on solving some pretty important problems for the national security and intelligence community.
Absolutely. I'm gonna pull out a little thing I have here from your team. Arcfield is there to solve the most complex and demanding national security and space-related challenges for its customers across the U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. federal civilian agencies, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Could you tell us, I guess we've got that brief picture of Arcfield, but it sounds like this hub of just innovation and development of technology. And I think I was reading you guys are also looking at future problems that people that you have as customers might need in the near future.
Yeah, we're certainly not all things to all people. We focus our efforts in the national security and intelligence domain, principally for the U.S. government and to a lesser extent the Royal Canadian Air Force. At a high level, what we do is engineering, modeling, simulation, test, and launch for national security satellite systems. That includes the design of the architecture, orbital mechanics, orbital modeling, modeling the interaction between next generation spacecraft and previous generation spacecraft. Everything from antenna deployment to communications, link closure analysis, anomaly resolution. That's everything from the physical to the electrical domains, and pretty much everything having to do with the building, deployment, and operations of overhead satellite systems. The other two major areas where we have significant practice are in ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles. Again, modeling, simulation, a lot of model-based systems engineering, digital engineering to design and test the next generation hypersonic and conventional ballistic missile systems. We're not a weapons manufacturer. We're more on the engineering and the physics and material science side.
Mm.
The third thing we do is cybersecurity, and cybersecurity can mean a lot of things to many people. In our domain, it involves creating solutions that allow disparate security levels to operate seamlessly with one another in an autonomous fashion. So think about networks like the internet, which are completely unclassified and kind of the wild, wild west, and then things that are government networks that are very prescribed and locked down and very rigid boundaries. We build autonomous systems that allow information to traverse between the two
Mm.
without having sensitive information leak out onto the internet accidentally, and without allowing malware or nefarious activity to leak in to the proprietary systems of the government from the internet.
And for satellite technology and things that are going into orbit, and I guess even the prep to launch, from a cybersecurity perspective, I'm sure there's a lot that's involved in that.
There's a lot more these days than there used to be, for sure. Um, that when you think about space-based systems, those who aren't familiar with them think they're in a world of their own, in a class of their own. In reality, the compute systems, the memory systems, the collect systems, the radios, the packet radios that packetize all the information, digitize all the information, their kins exist here on in the terrestrial networks. They're not terribly unique. What makes them unique is their ability to be serviced at a great distance, their ability to withstand radiation and high shock and vibe, wide swings in thermal environments. But the inner workings of those systems are very similar to the ones that we use here every day on Earth and at sea and in other environments, meaning they have the same vulnerabilities. They have the same cyber vulnerabilities of the systems that we use every single day at work. So when you think about the satellite systems of old, I'm going back to the beginning of my career, maybe 30 years ago, they were pretty proprietary, pretty unique. Their brethren did not exist in the terrestrial networks. They
Mm.
were kind of specific, mission specific. Nowadays, a lot of the components are dual use components, and therefore we have to care for those vulnerabilities the same way we do in terrestrial networking.
Mm. It's amazing how when I went to school for aerospace engineering, one of the things that was very much the mantra was, flight proven hardware only, and there really wasn't a lot of room for uh, developing a lot of new tech because there wasn't a lot of money in the industry, so you had to use it wisely, kind of thing. But as we get closer and farther, we're seeing demonstrations like Starlink
Mm-hmm.
across the Earth, especially in Ukraine recently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it seems like there's a push to update where it's needed, update technology. Do you guys see that at an intersection at Arcfield? Have you guys been on? I guess how does that work with you guys, having been in the industry for so long?
We see a cross section of two markets. We see the national security space, which is still a very they apply a very rigid discipline of systems engineering and risk management,
Mm,
as you would anticipate in any militarized system or any system that was used for continuity of operations, continuity of governance, and so forth.
mm,
So there's a lot of attention paid to building fail-safe systems, those with high reliability, high availability. Therefore, they cost a lot. They take longer to develop. There's a lot more care placed in the risk assurance prior to launch and during launch than you would see in commercial systems. That being said, they have to interoperate with those commercial systems more and
right.
more, and so that's where we see that cross section. I love the fact that between SpaceX and Amazon and a few others, they've brought the launch cost down dramatically,
Mm,
orders of magnitude cheaper than it used to be, which has allowed for a lot more experimentation, allowed for less expensive satellite systems with shorter lifespans to enter into the space domain. And it provides us in the national security domain more more tools in the tool chest, more blades on that Swiss Army knife. So there's
mm,
more capability that we can take full use of. But at the same time, it does not relieve us of our responsibility to make sure that our systems are there 100% of the time, especially when the United States and our allies need them the most.
mm. Absolutely. And as you were talking about the how successful these need to be and how locked in and secure they need to be and stable, it makes me think of I went to In the early days of me working in aerospace, I went to a conference. It was a material science conference, but they were talking about uh, the success rate of safety of, commercial airliners and how impressive it was to have such a high level of safety. And I'm sure that that same thing is carried over to your industry and what Arcfield does.
Absolutely, particularly I mean, in everything that we do,
Mhm.
frankly, as we were speaking about the space domain, the number of tests and models and simulations and failure events that are modeled prior to launch, prior to satellite integration, even into the payload fairing, is sometimes mind-boggling.
Mm,
And um, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that this, in some cases, they're very ordinary payloads. In other cases, they're very exquisite payloads that have
mm,
very specific mission applicability. And we, as a team, government, contractor, military alike, need to make sure that these systems make it into orbit and that they're successful. The taxpayer trusts us to spend their money wisely. As I said before, it is a costly endeavor, and therefore, sometimes a year or two of mission assurance and risk reduction activities is performed while the satellite is going through its final acceptance testing, while it's going through integration testing. You won't find that in the commercial domain. These
mm.
the small sats, and it doesn't mean one's better than the other. They're
Right.
there to serve different purposes. Not uncommon for you mentioned, Starlink. It's not uncommon for them to put 80 or 100 of those small sats into payload fairing for deployment on a single launch. And if 20 of them don't make it to orbit, it's a shame. But
Right.
this network's going to keep operating, and they'll be able to fill in the holes just
Mm.
by doing some orbital maneuvering.
And it makes me think of how intensive this job is, and the process of putting something into space. And it's something that, having someone like yourself with your experience, I'd love to ask this question and kind of get your thought on the approach. We talk a lot about the SpaceX approach, kind of the uh, fail hard, learn faster, kind of we can deal with these 20 not working. Can you give me an insight into the thought process of where the line is for you guys, of how much testing you do, and where do you finally say we feel comfortable with the risk we've assessed, and we can proceed?
It starts at the engineering level, and when we look at designing, say for instance, a military payload or an intelligence payload, there's a great deal of care put into making sure that its function is something that is not observable by the adversaries, making sure that its cyber vulnerabilities are identified early and are cared for, making sure that we provide an ability to do software upgradable componentry wherever possible.
Mm,
And then when uh, the military designs anything, they talk about four nines available, five nines available. Those systems are just not worth the money generally in the commercial domain, save
mm,
for a moment the telecommunications main core infrastructure that tends to be very highly available and highly reliable. But everything else is viewed as just disposable or replaceable, or it's perfectly acceptable if it operates in a degraded state because there's a multitude of objects that are going to take over the processing or the communications or the uplinks or the downlinks. Again, when you're building these um, national security systems, they're so unique in the functions that they perform. It's not conceivable, both economically and from a mission standpoint, to build a dozen of them. It's more likely
right.
we're going to build three or four of them, and therefore the if you start to do the math and you do failure rate analysis and you look at mean time between failure of individual componentry, you very quickly find yourself into building redundant systems and overly redundant systems to make sure that they operate when you need them the most. I don't have a good answer for where's the clear line.
Okay.
I rarely see national security systems or military systems that don't have very stringent availability requirements and reliability requirements, and therefore it drives us into a much more rigorous systems engineering practice.
Yeah, no, thank you. The thought process alone that you described is what I was looking for, so that's amazing. let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Manscaped. If you go to manscaped.com, you can get 20% off anything in the store by using the code word SPACE. Since the beginning of this year, we've been using the new beard hedger that Manscaped made, which has multiple different settings. Basically, the blade moves to the guard itself. And if anyone's had a beard trimmer or razor that's had like all those different head pieces that changes the length that the hair goes away from the blade, it's such a pain. There's so many pieces. I mean, think about how much plastic is made every time a razor is made, and there's so many of those cheap ones that you find when you're on the road and you forgot the thing that you needed to shave or trim your beard. The beard hedger is doing it right. I love the thing. I'm all the way up to 6 millimeters on the wheel. So slowly growing my beard. I have this like spot around my chin, kind of like below my lower lip, like the goatee area. That like gets like really agitated when the beard hair grows. I just have thick Greek hair, and so I loved the Lawnmower 4.0 because that just was able to handle like that legit Greek hair. And now with the beard hedger, I have so many options with my beard, and it's quick. That's the great thing. That's what I love about Manscaped. It is quick. They give you everything you need to take care of manscaping yourself and taking care of yourself. You look good, you feel good. My beard has never been as comfortable as it's been. It used to get like really itchy and scraggly, but with the comb and the beard oil, which I love, I got to get more of. I've got to go on manscaped.com to pick up some more stuff. They've got some great stuff. The Beard Hedger Pro kit gives you a ton of stuff. If you want to go on that beard journey with me, I think we're going to try the Riker here soon. We're going to go for the Lieutenant Riker and see how close we can get that. We got to have a space theme with this, but this. Thanks to our sponsor at Manscaped, you can get 20% off at manscaped.com. If you use the code word SPACE, that's 20% off anything in the store, free shipping. And if you're on the beard journey, join me with the Beard Hedger Pro kit. But they have so much more there. If you're looking for anything for your grooming needs, that's manscaped.com. Code word SPACE, 20% off, free shipping. Thank you, Manscaped, for being a sponsor. And now back to the episode. To tell me about the people that you work with. I'm sure you must have a very interesting set of background skills as a team that's necessary. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Like what makes a good team at Arcfield?
Yeah, I think I meet with all of our first of all with all of our employees in town halls like most CEOs would do on a quarterly basis. But more importantly, I meet with every new employee that comes in every Monday. So we start between 5 and 15 people every single Monday,
Wow.
and we introduce people into the company. Most of them come from one of three places. One, former military service, and we love the fact that we're more than 25% veterans.
Wow.
And I'll say why in a moment, the relevance there. It's not just the fact that they're veterans. Or they come from government service. They served in a civilian agency in a defense capacity or in an intelligence agency, or they're coming from one of our competitors that are, good companies that do a lot of similar engineering, whether it's material science or chemical engineering, electrical engineering, computer science, and so forth. But the most important thing, and one of the things that I ask all of our new employees every Monday is, for me, I go to sleep and I wake up under the same flag as everybody else. Because of the environment we're in, it's a very domestic organization. The vast majority of folks are US citizens. And there has to be a sense of patriotism and pride for building these systems. If that's not your thing, it's going to be a difficult environment to work in because you're constantly going to be comparing yourself to some of your peers that are in very dissimilar environments. This again doesn't mean one's better than the other, but if what excites you is creating a technological unfair advantage for the United States and its allied nations so that we can keep the world safe, if we do intelligence and defense properly, then nations never go to war. If you've got the appropriate show of force and the ability to see over the horizon with next generation intelligence, it is a peacekeeping mission, and we do that through the application of very advanced science and technology. If that excites you, this is probably a good place for you to work. You're gonna see a lot of important missions, and we're going to challenge you to be better than everybody else while you're here. If that's not what lights your fire, it's totally fine. There's lots of jobs out there, but that I think is one of the main differences. And when we look at people with multidimensional disciplines and diverse backgrounds and experience, um, there's that unifying factor that is
Mm.
that sense of pride around providing serving a patriotic mission from a civilian standpoint. I think that's probably a hallmark of most of our folks in Arcfield.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Could you tell me more about the 25% veterans that you guys are having in your workforce? And you,
Sure.
you mentioned
Yeah.
there was something else that you wanted to touch on.
Well, it's not just that they're veterans. It's that we have a volunteer military. These
Mm.
people, at some point, at a young age, usually volunteered to serve their country, and in many cases, to put themselves in harm's way. If you think about the veterans, the separated veterans that we're getting today, they were involved in a 20-year war on terror in some form or fashion. Doesn't mean they were storming the desert with a rifle on their back, but they were involved in this important mission, and many of them were deployed. Many of them were forward deployed, and they did their duty and they served their country. But they're not done, and that was the other thing, is that
Mm.
they have this sense of duty and service that they want to continue to be involved. And if you're like me, you're in your 50s, and no one's going to put you on the front lines with a bucket on your head and a rifle in your hands, but you still have a role to play,
Yeah.
and you can play a very important role. And that's what we see in many of our veterans. They're certainly not finished,
Yeah.
and they just have a passion for success.
Yeah, the mission continues, as they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about so one of the things that I'm learning as I get a little bit older, I'm 33 years old right now. There are a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are just starting their careers, or maybe they left STEM and they're trying to get back into STEM, or whatever the scenario might be. Um, could you tell me about your path to becoming the CEO, and what that role means to you now, and kind of the things you had to learn to get there, or did it always come natural to you? Like, is this the position that you were meant to be in?
I always smile when I get that question because I didn't have a desire to be in charge, to be the CEO, to be the head of a specific unit. I was always passionate about technology. I grew up in a patriotic household. I'm passionate about serving my country. Those things were kind of table stakes for me. Um, I knew I was going to be in a STEM field. I began my career, luckily enough, with Lockheed Martin. I was designing communications payload packages and terrestrial communication systems. And a wonderful opportunity came along for me to join Bell Laboratories, and that was kind of, as an electrical engineer, that's kind of like the storied organization that you want to be a part of. And it was really as it was separating from AT&T and going through ownership with Lucent Technologies, and one thing led to another where I found myself being encouraged by a multitude of mentors to take on more leadership positions, get exposure into the sales and marketing organization, start to take some, in my master's class, start to take some courses in managerial accounting, really getting me outside of my wheelhouse a little bit, but enough mentors that saw something in me and said, you ought to try to broaden your horizons a little bit and
Mm.
get more experience. And that helped me a lot. As I said, went into sales and marketing and business management, planning, strategy development, and got a lot of exposure. Over the course of the years, I kept finding myself with opportunities to step into more and more leadership positions, a research department lead, a sales regional manager, um, a what they called a SWAT team, which was an optical communications focused team on capturing specific markets by selling and implementing optical communication systems. You know, then moving into strategy development, business strategy, capture strategy, planning, and then execution all the way up through COO of a subsidiary company. And then eventually, when they launched a CEO search, the board came to me and said, "We would love for you to enter yourself into the evaluation for our next CEO." And I gladly did that. I felt it was an honor. I was selected. This is again a former company, and I was nervous as heck. I hardly got any sleep. You can ask my wife. The first few years, I felt like I was constantly having to prove myself. I was,
Mm.
roughly 40 years old and running almost a $500 million organization,
Wow.
and it was frightening. And at the same time, I learned at that point to surround myself with A players.
Yeah.
Make sure that I've got people that have the experience and the know-how that augment my shortcomings, my deficiencies, whether it's in style or um, personality or even technical acumen. Finding ways to build a really highly functional, collaborative team,
Mm.
and that has served me exceptionally well. When the opportunity came about a year and a half ago to join Arcfield, I knew what questions to ask about the organization, about the people, where it was heading as we carved the business out of Peraton and created its own subsidiary.
Mm.
What was the interest of our investment group at Veritas to invest in the team, invest in the facilities, invest in the people, the technology, building a market? Were we going to be in this for the long haul? And they have long-term vision for how they invest in the business. So I felt like this go around, I was a lot better positioned to know what to ask
Mm.
and to make sure that we could really hit the ground running and make the best of this, and absolutely no looking back. It's been a great, roughly, 14, 15 months for me so far.
That's incredible. Yeah, congratulations. I mean, it sounds exciting.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
so, one of the things that I want to ask, and I ask everyone that comes on here for this at Arcfield, if someone was interested in looking at what jobs are available or learning more, where would they go to?
Easiest thing to do is to go to arcfield.com and click on careers. You'll see that we have openings in both Canada and in the United States. And you can search by location, you can search by job function, skill. There's a variety of different keywords that you can search. You can even search on specific customers,
Oh, nice.
and I would encourage people to do that. It's we're talking about a engineering centric, STEM centric organization. We do program management, we do proposals, we do technical writing, we do budgeting, we do planning.
Yeah.
So 1,300 going on 1,400 employees. We're not all engineers, thankfully.
Yep.
We have
Yes.
people.
It could need the balance. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sure there'll be some people checking it out. One of the topics that we've brought up, I was 10 years old, 11 years old when 9/11 happened. I lived most of my life with us at war. Um, and, we're definitely entering a different phase here as we're in 2023. Starlink has become if we're talking about the domain of space, whether it wants to or not, is dragging the domain of space into needing more military intervention. Could you tell me more about, and I'm sure with your position at Arcfield, maybe there's some things you can't talk about, but when you see what Starlink has done in just the general idea of space becoming a domain, could you tell me your thoughts on where it is today and what you've seen that's good about it and maybe some things that could be done differently?
Yeah, I think the latter part of that question is the tougher part. So I'll start with the easy part. I, I see, Starlink is a commercial communications service provider with a different business model than what was traditionally envisioned for overhead communications. Bidirectional as opposed to broadcast technology, as we're used to with Sirius XM and some of the broadcast cable TV. Starlink is meant to be, and it is bidirectional and high data rate, highly reliable, highly available. The antenna systems aim themselves autonomously, looking for a multitude of satellites simultaneously, seeking the one with the higher gain. So if you think about how cellular technology grew up and you went from first generation to second generation. By the time we're in third generation, we're into digital packetized information and we're connecting to multiple antennas at the same time. And the radio is making the decision about make before break and looking at power levels and signal to noise ratio and error rate and so forth and making the autonomous switching. And then we get into 4G, we're really into high data rate, doing again multipath communications. All of that underlying technology and some of the networking and the decisions and the algorithms have all made their way now into the space domain. It doesn't happen by accident. I made it sound very passive.
Right.
SpaceX has invested very heavily in this and have really attracted some top talent to make this happen.
Mm,
I'm saying all this because there is an evolution that brought that communications service and technology into the marketplace. It is also the great unifier, communications, open, free communications, not free from a dollar standpoint, but unfettered, unfiltered
mm,
communications. And if you think about, in the I guess it was probably around the 2004, 2005 timeframe, I believe, when we had the Arab Spring and the uprising, and there was a movement globally amongst citizenry that were in oppressed regions, and they said we're gonna fight back. And the first thing that their governments did in order to get control of them was to shut off the internet, shut off access to the internet, filter it. And if the theory was if they can't communicate with each other, they're going to have a difficult time organizing, and we'll be able to control the way people think much more effectively. I said at the time, as we're thinking about what weapons should be deployed to help these people gain their freedom, it was obvious to me and to many the most powerful weapon that we have is the internet.
mm.
It's access to information. Connect them, let them talk to each other, let them talk about freedom, let them organize. And sure, bad things happen on the internet too,
Sure, they do.
but yeah, but the ability for people to communicate and organize generally results in freedom and peace. And that's not what motivated SpaceX or Elon Musk, I'm sure, to create Starlink. This is a business. They're going to charge subscribers for this service. At the same time, they made the decision, I think, completely independent of the U.S. government, to refocus some of their assets in that region of the world to do as I just said, to provide communications, allow people to communicate and help them be free in the end. So I give them a lot of credit for doing that. It is a game changer. It's something that, frankly, the U.S. government, everybody turns to the government when things go bad and they need help.
Yeah.
Not set up to do this. We're meant to connect warfighting ships with planes and logistics supply systems and
Mm,
reconnaissance systems, not to provide communications to the disenfranchised or those seeking
yeah.
freedom. So I'm glad that they're there, and I think they're going to play a very very valuable role going forward.
And it seems like this partnership of, the private side of space and the public side of space has been doing this dance the last 5 years, maybe publicly, although I'm sure there's been a lot of conversations over the last decades when shuttle was phasing out and we were trying to figure out what to do and how not to lose our infrastructure, which as I've heard from many folks, including like Embedded Ventures, about just the infrastructure. GPS
Mm-hmm.
is something that needs a lot of updating. It seems like a theme uh, for everything, whether it's terrestrial or in orbit. It seems like there's a lot of things that need updating that have just seen time with our delay in progress here in space. Is there anything infrastructure wise, or um, is there anything in that vein that you think is interesting or something that people haven't heard of but needs some attention?
Well, you mentioned a couple of important ones, and there's the whole group of solutions around PNT, pointing, navigation, and timing.
Mm,
And it's something that the military has focused on because it is at the core of ensuring availability and reliability, like we talked about earlier, once systems are on orbit, making sure that you've got uh, accurate telemetry data so that you can point the asset in the right direction and that we can navigate the asset in a way that will ensure that it's operating efficiently, and then that you have the highly precise timing that's necessary to do those make before break connections and to be able to provide positional data, which is often related to timing on the spacecraft. When the early days of GPS, in the early days of GPS, the whole algorithm around timing and doing time difference of arrival and triangulation for geolocation on Earth was so complicated. It was inconceivable that industry was going to catch up anytime soon, or that an adversary would break into that system or start spoofing timing signals to throw off your navigation. But it was inevitable. It was a matter of time before that started happening, and it did start happening. So in the early days, they didn't build a lot of protections. It just was, space was owned by the United States at that point,
Mm,
and the complex signal waveforms was the protection around GPS
mm,
and some of the other systems. That's not the case anymore. So there has been a lot of advancements in doing pointing navigation and timing in a denied environment. So what if someone's jamming those frequencies in space? What if they're jamming them on Earth? What if they're spoofing it? Is there any kind of checksum that we can envision that ensures that gives the receiver the assurance that the signal it's receiving is the correct one and not one that has been spoofed in any way? So I'm happy to say that obviously people didn't wait for these failures before they started designing solutions,
yeah.
but it's something that many people just take for granted. Oh, I have to get there. I'll just open up my phone and use the GPS on my phone. What if it's not there? Or what if it's fake?
Yeah.
How disastrous would that be? And now put yourself in a mission critical environment. So that's just something that, again, I think a lot of people take for granted that they don't realize is a heavy investment area in the national security area.
Let's take a break to talk about our other sponsor, which is our own 3D printing lab for Today in Space, AG 3D Printing. This is the lab that spawned from this podcast. It was an idea, as I was learning how to be a science communicator and kind of diving into other exciting things in the STEM field. I found 3D printing, and I slowly started a lab and a parts business where we help bring your ideas into reality with 3D printing. We are really good at what we do, and we can help you from all sides of the project, whether you're like a student and maybe your 3D printing lab doesn't have what you need, or it's busy and there's no room, or you're just looking to create an idea. Maybe you've got an idea for a business or something that's helpful around the house, a replacement part for something that's not made anymore. 3D printing is so useful for custom solutions to things that are just really not available or not made anymore. It's a great tool. It's a great tool for those using the iterative process, right? If you want to develop an idea, like our friends at SnapCollar, they had an idea where they wanted to transform the collared shirt game and make it so that your collar in your shirt stays like it's supposed to, sharp and crisp. And we went through many iterations, but quickly and under a budget that two guys who are trying to start a business while also doing their day job. Like, we are here to help those types of folks. And of course, we 3D print stuff for the podcast all the time. We've got some new things coming up. I'm getting into 2 cosplays this year for myself. So the lab is humming, and there's lots of filament being pushed through those nozzles. So uh, if you're looking to get some 3D printing projects done, head over to ag3d-printing.com to check out what we're about. You can get a free quote on your project. You can literally just reach out to us, even if you just have an idea written down on a napkin, or you've done it a bunch of times and you just need some extra help printing something. That's what we're here for. And you can also support us by going to our Etsy shop at ag3dprinting.etsy.com. That's where we have all of our designs available, where we 3D print on demand. These parts don't get made until you order them. Otherwise, they sit as plastic. But if you're looking to support us and get a cool gift, or maybe you have an idea that you'd like us to put up there, we've got a ton of stuff, especially if you're a space fan. We have our James Webb Space Telescope coasters. We're going to be selling our own model of the James Webb Space Telescope soon. That'll be 3D printed on there. We also have our rocket pens that we're slowly designing, a Falcon 9, a Starship. So there's lots of ways to help support us. ag3dprinting.etsy.com is the way you can do it right now. If you're trying to do something for yourself, we're here to help bring that idea into reality with our 3D printing lab, AG3D. So thank you to AG3D. I'm thanking myself here, but that is what originally was paying the bills here for this podcast, keeping the lights on, the mics running, and now we also have sponsors like Manscaped. So it's cool to have this commercial still be here. We're very excited about all the stuff we do with AG3D printing, and it keeps us busy, and it helps us do more things like go to rocket launches and see cool stuff like we did over the summer last summer for Artemis 1. So AG3D printing, check it out. We've got a lot of exciting stuff for you this year, but we've rambled on too long. Back to our conversation with Kevin Kelly, the CEO of Arcfield. Thanks. And as we start getting closer and closer to, Artemis 3 and
Hmm.
sending the first humans back to the moon, we have a legitimate application in real life where the infrastructure is not there, and we're building it actively. I I was thinking I'm working on a segment. We're going to just talk about big picture ideas of living in space, and that's one of the realities that we have to kind of get around. And it's kind of a good excuse, knock on wood, everything goes well with Artemis. We're ideally setting up the big picture goal of living in space full time. Are there any technologies or infrastructure that you can think of that doesn't is very much needed, but is just not there yet that people should know about?
This is going to sound a little weird. I'll start with one that's not weird, and then I'll move to the weird.
Okay.
So, the not weird one, the the choke point in space communications is usually the uplink and the downlink. It's the slowest link,
Mm,
and it is where communications gets really challenged, and you need to do some active filtering because the pipes going up and down, whether they're RF or optical, typically is where your choke point is. I know Artemis is flying several first demonstration satellites are going to fly some demonstration payloads to do optical communications, high speed optical communications from lunar orbit to back to the Earth, which is very doable today.
mm,
And it came at decades worth of investment in photonics, high powered optical photonics for space based communications. That's something that's easy for folks to understand, but simply did not exist in
mm.
the Mercury and Apollo era. We all saw the grainy footage and it was delayed coming back and so
Yeah.
forth. It is conceivable that we will be watching high definition live video from the moon using optical downlink. The only way it can happen is with optical downlinks, and
Mm.
that is a not so future technology, meaning it has been demonstrated very successfully in space. So I'm excited to see that. Here's the weird one. Um, you're talking about living in space. We're mammals. Certain body functions require gravity, and
Mm.
um, as you think about the humans on the space station and having to mimic as much as they can the gravitational forces for to maintain cellular mitosis and cellular reproduction and things
Bone
like
density.
that,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
has been a challenge, and they come back changed people right after a year. Now think about 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, mimicking the gravitational forces without doing the
Right.
centrifugal wheel or something like that. um, I think is going to be a real challenge. I'm both excited and also very curious to see how we're going to do this.
Yeah, same. That's I mean every function you're pretty much putting a variable on. One of the
Yeah.
things I haven't heard of one yet, but that I'm excited about is different kinds of sports developing. They're basically running marathons up there on the ISS on a regular basis, and to think about there being a moon sport or like an orbital sport is kind of a cool idea, and I wonder what that's gonna look like.
You know it's coming. I mean,
Yeah.
so much money and innovation has been poured into sports and entertainment. It's a matter of time.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be crazy. And one of the things that I'm hopeful for, but I I always take with a grain of salt because I don't see much development, and that's Blue Origin and say Orbital Reef, and they smartly so run with a cape over a lot of what they're doing, so that gives them a good advantage when they actually are ready to put things out. But also, it seems like it takes longer. Space development takes many years, but
Mhm.
um, with their orbital reef platform and kind of commercializing a lot of the stuff that's been, like say the ISS. Like we've got some ideas, but nobody's really commercializing that. That's going to be necessary before we have a base on the moon. So in that perspective, when I think about cybersecurity and automation, I think that there's some real advantages to automating the things that these test pilots and astronauts are testing and making them uh, like you don't have to think about it's being taken care of. Um, Thinking about that, is there anything that gets you excited about where AI and cybersecurity can take us when we start actually living in space on a regular basis?
Yeah, I AI is appearing in just about everything that we
Yeah.
do in every form and factor of life, and it just as we bathe ourselves in more and more information, the the need for autonomous processing and the development of artificial intelligence is, I think, just as table stakes now. It's embedded in everything. It's kind of a general, cop out answer to what you're saying. I don't see the world getting simpler when we move
Yeah.
into to space,
Mm.
and as we are embedding artificial intelligence in systems capable of learning and improving efficiency in just about everything that we do, even just in conventional business intelligence, monitoring the metrics of a supply chain or a business and having to do that autonomously in order to create additional efficiencies.
Mm.
It's everywhere. And if you think about the variables of living in space and all of the scientific experimentation that will likely be part of that, as well as the just the need to monitor very complex systems that are potentially in a dynamic, changing environment. It's at least as in terms of what we know today, both AI and machine learning have to be a significant part of that future.
Mm. And I'm interested in in how these AI are being trained. I'm still very much learning, but I get to talk to folks like yourself, and kind of throw ideas out there and see if I'm at least on the right path. But we're learning with these language models that they do have limitations,
Mhm.
and things that when we live in the age of misdis malinformation, we now have this amazing technology that can accidentally lie to us and not even realize that they are. Um, and so I think the training is going to be really important. I'm excited about what NASA could create because I'm sure their training would be high end, and folks that would be working with them would be doing that well. But I think there's also going to be room for AI that's not really that good. But because it's AI and because it's the thing right now, it's going to get used. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right. I'll give you a perfect analogy. I have a self-driving vehicle that it's not a Tesla, it's a Mercedes,
Hmm.
but it uses a similar technology, and I can hop on the highway in the morning and set it so that it maintains a certain speed, doesn't go over a certain speed. I can have it read the speed limit signs and change its speed autonomously. It'll change lanes to avoid an accident. It'll pull over if it thinks I'm asleep or I'm somehow
Oh wow.
inattentive. It'll do lots of things. It's not as good as a human. It's
Yeah.
not even as good as a bad driver. So it's really important that we I use it to augment my driving, meaning
Mm.
I do team driving. I call my car Hilda. There's a whole different podcast for that. Um, so Hilda and I share the driving, and I'm perfectly okay with the autonomy doing speed control and making suggestions to keep me in the center of the lane.
Mm,
I'm going to make the lane changes, even though the computer's capable of doing it.
yeah.
I'm observing more and I'm processing more than the machine is able to do, not because of the compute power, but because despite the fact that the car has, I don't know, 30, 40 sensors, I still have more sensors.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot more and I've learned a lot more. And
Mm,
to your point around learning, there's not a real good feedback mechanism in a lot of these AI systems, and they're only as smart as the code allowed them to be initially. Some are
mm,
learning faster. That's what we've seen, but the majority of them operate somewhat independently, and they don't have a good feedback mechanism like my car. So it's not going to become a better driver over time.
mm. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, the for me, what I'm looking for automation to do is to allow me to spend more time being creative and spending
Mm-hmm.
less time doing, executive things and or just like simple, uh, for instance, like transcribing this podcast is going to be done by AI for me, and that just takes out a huge portion of it. And it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. I don't need it to be perfect. I'm looking for like what's the map of the episode, where can we get some clips, and for me that's really valuable. There's other things like intellectual property issues where, allegedly some of these, art-based AI have basically trained uh, entire AIs based on someone else's work that they're not getting anything for that, and it's just out there now. I've heard some other things of allegedly some audiobook artists who, signed away their rights to their voice early in the day, and now entire, voice AI is going to be used for them, and they see none of that. So it's gold rush esque, just like NFTs were recently. And I think it's gonna get weird. It's definitely gonna get weirder before it gets better. Um, but is there anything that's a good mindset for folks who are just trying to wrap their heads around this that you might be able to like offer and how you approach it? Because I love your idea of like sharing the driving. I think that's a healthy mindset, but I think it's tough for people to start there.
What came to mind as you were walking through that is when we started finding the need to apply artificial intelligence, and specifically, that in combination with machine learning, where the processing and the intelligence is developed over time. It came about in my world, in my professional world, because our collection capabilities kept increasing year after year after year. And if you think about the RF or the imagery vacuum cleaner in space, it's just collecting everything.
Mm.
Eventually you run out of processing power with all the
Yeah.
supercomputers and all the brain power on Earth, and you're overwhelmed with information. And so you had to create an artificial intelligence layer to start processing and doing pre-processing and saying, here are actually the 5 things you need to look at, the other 10,000 things you can ignore for the time being. And so we created that artificial intelligence layer. Now think about what you said. What is the artificial intelligence if you sign away your voice rights? What's it doing if you're using the chat program that's creating all kinds of confusion and concern around the internet? What are those systems doing? They're actually creating more content, which was the reason that they were invented in the first place, was to deal with the overwhelming information overload,
Wow.
right? The big data problem. And what are these systems doing? They're actually creating more data. And so it's starting to accelerate. The amount of data creation is starting to accelerate. And when you think about, have I created a solution to a problem, or have I created a brand new problem?
Yeah. Yeah, and just as you're saying that, my concern immediately was, is the infrastructure going to get overloaded and choked out if we start like a DDoS attack? Like, are we going to overwhelm the amount of stuff that's there and just choke out the internet? That's crazy.
It's a valid question. And your question about authenticity. Just because I saw it 10 times doesn't mean it's correct.
Yeah.
But I did see it 10 times, and one system created, or one person created it, and then 9 of them mimicked it, and all of a sudden it's viewed as fact, and it may be
Yeah.
completely false.
Yeah, that's a that's a topic that one of the reasons why I started the podcast was just to um, try and create talk about complex things, but try and do it in the simplest of ways. We don't always succeed at that, but that was the attempt, and this definitely makes things harder. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna lie. So getting sharper. I don't want something technical or STEM based to become magic because I think the that's the dark side, I think, of STEM is when it gets to that point. So being able to speak with folks like yourself and to kind of break this down is always much appreciated.
Sure. Yeah. If you
Any yeah
if you're worried about it becoming magic, just go back to my self-driving car analogy. If you put complete faith in those systems, and unfortunately you see stories on the news where people have done that, it will
yeah
fail you. It will
yeah
fail you, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for taking advantage of a lifetime of experience and knowledge when making decisions and being analytical and synthetic or synthesizing data.
Hmm.
It's the human brain is absolutely amazing. When you think you've started to replace it with the computer, I would argue even as powerful as they are today, you're only talking about a fraction of the average compute power of the human brain. So
Yeah.
don't put your faith in it. Use it as a use it as a tool.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we're in the process of getting people first attuned to the idea that it is a tool to be used, and then you can have kind of the moral thing that, a tool can be good or bad. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it's who uses it and how you use it. Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been great. Let's close out with any final thoughts, anything we missed that we should touch on, any last words for the folks out there?
I'll speak to you. Talked about people that were early in their STEM career, and they may be avid listeners, and which is completely understandable of your podcast. Um, my encouragement is to because STEM can be applied in I don't know 1,000 different ways, even within a specific discipline. Find what makes you passionate. Find something that gets you up in the morning and that you're going to want. You mentioned having the time to be more creative. Find something that allows you to apply your own creativity and your own brand to what it is that matches your technical interests and follow that. It troubles me when I see folks who've invested so much time and effort in obtaining their excellence and their academic acumen and proficiency in a specific discipline and then say I never really wanted to do that and then they go find something else to do. There are more ways than you can imagine to apply that technical knowledge and experience. And what I tell, particularly when I tell engineers that are graduating with their undergrad, you have been given and you have earned the fundamental knowledge and experience that will allow you to go to the next step. And it's all about exploration and personal development and professional development at this point. So keep your eyes and ears open to opportunity and be open to trying things that you think might be completely different than what you imagined yourself doing. And I think you'll find it to be very rewarding and you'll find that groove. And when you do, that's when you're really going to see your performance and your happiness kind of rise at the same level. Just a little bit of personal and emotional advice.
No, thank you for that. I can definitely say that does work. I mean, that's part of the reason why this podcast exists, and why I work in 3D printing because I
Yeah.
found that that intersection of um, 3D printing in space, especially for in space manufacturing. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate crossing of the streams for me, and where I'm seeing things. So, and what's interesting and why this segment exists and why we're talking today is to provide those examples. I there are a lot of people who are in the STEM field who have family or had someone else they knew that worked in that, but there's also many people who didn't. And so
Mm-hmm.
they go into it without the idea of what jobs are actually out there and what careers are there, and then you get stuck because you only see you don't know what's out there. So thank you for sharing your story today. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate the interest and good luck with the podcast. It's I think it's a great product.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you. Okay, Kevin, thank you for joining us. This is Today in Space. Thank you for being one of our people of science. Make sure to spread love and spread science, and we'll see you on the next episode. Have a
Okay.
good one.
Thank you. Bye bye.